Well, it's been a huge week in American politics, what with Joe Biden overseas bumbling his way through European capitals and a big NATO summit meeting. Hard work for anyone, much less a man of 80 who had to skip a big leaders' dinner because the previous 3 days' events had taken so much out of him. Luckily, however, all that overseas travel did have its rewards, like lots of fresh children to sniff. Joe, stop eating the children. And while Joe Biden was off nibbling the youngsters and generally exhibiting behavior that would see him banned from every shopping mall in the country, Kamala Harris was out revealing her own plans for the next generation.
When we invest in clean energy and electric vehicles and reduce population, more of our children can breathe clean air and drink clean water.
Reduce population. Right, okay, so that's the new environmental program. Clean energy, expensive, reliable, but, well, okay, if it's planet. Electric vehicles, expensive, unreliable, no fun, but again, saving the planet. And that last one, again, reduce population? Sorry, you first. Methinks Kamala may have just said, however, the quiet part out loud, revealing that she is an adherent to the same sinister anti-human ideology that has infected the Western left since the Club of Rome. The Club of Rome, by the way, was an outfit that in the 60s and 70s promoted the whole idea of limits to growth and said the world would be starving by now. Well, totally wrong, but totally in keeping with the progressive, or should I say regressive, left's belief that people are the problem. But if anything, the world is suffering a fertility crisis where there won't be enough people to keep civilization going. But that's another topic for another day. But that does bring us to one other interesting character. Someone with, I think, more brains than both Joe and Kamala put together. I'm talking about I'm not talking about any of the Republican candidates, but rather the insurgent Democrat Robert F. Kennedy Jr. He's a character who people like to call controversial, and so dismiss him as someone to be taken, not to be taken seriously. I don't think that's fair, though, because even though I disagree with him on many, many issues, I think he is right about a much bigger problem, namely the narrative and the way those in power use fear to shape the narrative and what people think to stay in power and grow their own wealth. Now, Kennedy is himself a big-time environmentalist and a lifelong outdoorsman who does believe in climate change. But whatever your views on whether or why the climate is changing, he doesn't fall into the same trap as the rest of the left. First, have a bit of Kennedy on global warming. And I'm warning you, don't dismiss him. Don't dismiss what he tries to say, because what comes next is brutally important.
Look around, you can see it everywhere. Ice caps are melting, etc. The Greenland ice sheet. I spent a lot of time outdoors, and I see over 69 years, I've seen the changes, and I've seen the mass migration of animals, of southern animals like black vultures, the northern increase in their ranges. I've kept track since I was a kid about when the leaves turns, and it's steadily moved up each year. And so I see that. All of my senses are telling me that the warming is occurring.
Ice caps melting, warming occurring. Well, I'm going to let Rowan take that on a little later in the show. But here's Kennedy's much bigger point.
That this crisis is being used as a pretext for clamping down totalitarian controls the same way that the COVID crisis was. And it's the same people, it's intelligence agencies, it's the World Economic Forum, it's the Billionaires Voice Club at Davos, and it's the same kind of cabal of people who will use every crisis to stratify society toward, greater power for the super rich and greater power for the military, greater power for the intelligence apparatus, and less power for everybody else. My approach to energy is using free markets and not top-down control. We can recover what we had, but we just have to stay out of fear, because that is the weapon of tyrants.
Even mentioned the WEF there. Now,
very good.
Look, if you're a regular watcher of the show, you know that the same fence posts that were put in during the pandemic will be used to pen us in even more tightly in the future on the basis of some future emergency. That emergency could be climate, and just look at the push to limit your mobility, your freedom to own a car, your energy use, how you cook, what you can eat, all of this stuff about how you can live. It could be war. And Kennedy is a great critic of the military-industrial complex that was warned about by no less a figure than Republican President Dwight D. Eisenhower. And he is deeply concerned about the Biden administration's quiet mobilization of troops in Europe. But it could also be the next pandemic, which so many experts seem so keen to warn us is coming, and sooner rather than later. And that's why I say that Kennedy, more than any other candidate on either side of politics, is calling this out, this fear reflex, and how certain people, let's call them elite, even if that's not a great descriptor for them, are using fear and putting the apparatus of government to maintain control at a time when their power is under more threat from the people than ever. Now, Kennedy, depending on which poll you believe, has as much as 20% support among Democrats. And anecdotally, an awful lot of big-time conservatives I speak to in the U.S. are also fans as well. Of course, the chances that he gets the nomination are pretty close to nil. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't listen to what he has to say on these issues, whether he is a Democrat or a Republican, about fear, manipulation, freedom, and the way mainstream politicians and the press abuse these ideas and us on a daily basis.